I would like to welcome everyone to the 2021 Black History Month Pan-Canadian Virtual Panel Discussion that is brought to you by Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation. My name is Bekla and I'm a volunteer here with TAYFFI. And I am a student at the University of Saskatchewan in my third year in the program of pharmacy. J'aimerais donner un bon bienvenue à tout le monde qui est en train de participer tout de suite. On vous remercie pour votre participation. Je suis Bekla Karakura et je suis une étudiante à l'Université de la Saskatchewan en troisième année dans le programme de la pharmacie. Et nous allons commencer cette discussion. Aujourd'hui, avant de commencer, on va faire la connaissance du territoire qu'on fait d'habitude. Nous voudrions commencer en soulignant que nous sommes sur le territoire visé par le traité numéro 6, qui est le traité traditionnel des cris et la terre ancestrale de la nation métisse. I'm going to start off with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we operate on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, and we want to pay our respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So I'm going to let my other co-moderator, Anthony, introduce himself, and I'm sure you guys know him.
Thank you so much, Bekla, for that wonderful introduction and welcome. My name is Anthony Adeboale Olushala, Executive Director here at the Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation. And indeed, I'll be co-hosting this session today, Pan-Canadian Virtual Panel Discussion with Bekla, a third-year student at the University of Saskatchewan, a demonstration of excellence of Black youth and their ability to lead when given the platform. To begin, I have the honor and direct privilege to welcome everyone joining from their respective homes in today's virtual discussion, celebrating 2021 Black History Month. In a very special way, we welcome our guest panelists drawn across Canada from coast to coast to coast. Again, a good way to demonstrate solidarity amongst Black Canadians and a show of support with one another and for one another. In a very special way, we acknowledge and thank is worship Charlie Clark, Mayor of Saskatoon, who has brought greetings and will be participating with us today, listening firsthand and participating as a guest observer, to know what it is that we, residents of this city, you can almost say citizens of Saskatoon, and our friends across Canada have to say about Black excellence. We appreciate in another special way, Honorable Ahmed Hussen, Minister for Families, Children and Social Development, who brings greetings to this celebration today. He is amongst others, some known, a lot not quite known yet. He's one of such trailblazers of Black families, of Black Canadians, and we're very privileged to have him bring greetings to us. As a growing population within a nation, still faced with challenge of managing its diversity, it is important that we cherish yesterday, reflecting on the heroic contributions and sacrifices of our forebearers who paved the way for us in Canada. We have to defend today by speaking up for Black excellence across social, political, economic spectrums of the Canadian society. And indeed, it is important that we protect tomorrow, ensuring a secure and sustainable future for tomorrow's leaders starting today, and ensuring that young Black Canadians and those yet unborn feel that this home, this place that we've all called home, is indeed a home for them to thrive and to succeed. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation, I will now introduce, alongside my co-panelist, my co-moderator, the guests for today. Thank you.
OK, pour commencer, on va introduire Dr. Judy White, qui est une professeure émérite, faculté de travail social, et qui travaille à l'Université de Regina. Elle est une travailleuse sociale agréée et elle travaille à l'Université de Regina. Elle a été doyenne de la faculté de travail social pendant 6 ans et demi et elle a pris sa retraite dans le mois de décembre 2019. Elle a une longue histoire de travail communautaire et de recherche avec les Canadiens noirs et d'autres nouveaux arrivants dans les prairies. Elle a aussi été présidente de la section de Regina du Congrès des femmes noires et nous voulons aussi souligner son mémoire de maîtrise qui s'intitulait A Study of the Issue of Isolation as it Affects Black Women of Caribbean Ancestry Living in Saskatchewan. Madame White, elle siège actuellement au conseil d'administration de l'Association canadienne pour la formation en travail social et ce rôle lui offre d'immenses possibilités de poursuivre son apprentissage sur l'intégration des approches décolonisées dans la formation en travail social. Dr. White a quitté Trinité et Tobago pour s'installer au Canada en 1987. Merci.
Thank you, Bekla. Now I'm going to recap briefly because there's quite a lot to say about Dr. Judy White, but there's only so much I can say just to recap, because indeed what Bekla has done is just the tip of the iceberg if you know Dr. White. Dr. White is a registered social worker and a professor emerita with the Faculty of Social Work, University of Regina. She is a past president of the Regina chapter of the Congress of Black Women. Dr. White currently serves on the board of the Canadian Association for Social Work Education. The role provides immense opportunity for her to continue to learn about integrating decolonialized approaches into social work education. Dr. White migrated to Canada from Trinidad and Tobago in 1987. Thank you, Dr. White, for all that you've been and continue to be. At this point, I'm going to introduce our next person, who is Mr. Kayode Akomolafe. Mr. Akomolafe was called to the bar as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria in 1995 and practiced as an associate in several law firms in Nigeria prior to migrating to Canada. Mr. Akomolafe currently works at the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission as an investigator, systemic initiatives. And this avails him for sure the opportunity of becoming part of a vibrant team that is working on several far-reaching human rights initiatives across Saskatchewan. And that also indeed is just a little bit about Mr. Kayode Akomolafe. Thank you.
Pour résumer en français, Kayode travaille avec le Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission en tant qu'enquêteur dans le cadre des initiatives institutionnelles. Il fait beaucoup de travail dans ce cadre-là. La prochaine personne sera Ingrid Cabezas. Elle est d'origine colombienne et elle est passionnée par les liens entre les cultures et avec les communications aussi. Elle a pu apprendre le métier d'animation radio au Collège de Radio-Télévision de Québec. Elle détient également un diplôme en communication publique à l'Université Laval. Elle a travaillé à la radio communautaire francophone du Canada, CKRL 89.1, au Québec et pour la radio communautaire du Grand Edmonton 97.9. Elle continue à montrer son application dans les milieux minoritaires à travers son émission Radio Cité Latina et qui est animé en français et en espagnol. Elle est aussi productrice du Contact Ontario. Merci.
Ingrid Cabezas is passionate about the links between cultures and communications. Ingrid continues to show her involvement in minority communities through her radio show, Sete Latina, hosted in French and Spanish, and is the producer of Contact Ontario. Ingrid joins us today all the way from Ottawa. Thank you. Moving on, I will be introducing a good young but mighty, if I can describe him that way, a young man with a heart of leadership, Gideon Isezerano. Gideon is a second-year engineering student at the University of Saskatchewan, fluent in English and French. He has chosen not to give us a bio because I believe there's a lot to say about Gideon as why. But I know, apart from being a good volunteer and a great representative of our organization at Truly Alive, Gideon has served, I believe, as one of the counselors for the youth arm with the minister, I believe, immigration. So thank you so much, Gideon, for being part of this session today.
Juste pour introduire Gédéon, il est un étudiant à l'Université de la Saskatchewan en deuxième année dans le programme du génie informatique. Donc, merci pour avoir participé avec nous. La prochaine personne, c'est Dr. Zita. Elle est actuellement boursière en recherche postdoctorale au département de santé communautaire et d'épidémiologie de l'Université de la Saskatchewan. Elle est chargée de cours à temps partiel dans le département de sociologie. Les recherches de Zita portent sur le genre et l'éducation, sur l'analyse des politiques et le développement international. Sa passion pour l'activisme universitaire l'a incité à lancer le projet One Change en 2019. Ce projet vise à élargir le discours sur l'éducation des filles en Afrique subsaharienne et elle a fourni du matériel pédagogique aux enfants, en particulier aux filles dans les communautés rurales. Elle aime l'engagement communautaire et aider les groupes défavorisés afin de renforcer leurs capacités et transformer leur vie. Merci beaucoup pour nous avoir rejoints.
And to our Anglophone friends participating and watching us from home, now we want to introduce Dr. Zita. Dr. Zita Seshi is presently a postdoctoral fellow with the Department of Community Health and Epidemiology at the University of Saskatchewan and a seasonal lecturer for the Department of Sociology. Zita enjoys community engagement and helping underprivileged groups build capacity to transform their lives. She's passionate for scholarly activism, which inspires her to initiate the One Change project in 2017. I believe there's a lot more to learn about Dr. Zita, and as we learn more about her, you will find out why we give you the iceberg introduction. Moving on, I'm privileged to introduce Mr. Charles Osuji, joining us from Calgary, Alberta. Mr. Charles Osuji is the managing partner at Osuji and Smith Lawyers. Mr. Charles is one of Canada's top most influential lawyers. I'm taking my time to say that. A community builder, a mentor, and a role model. By the age of 30, Charles Osuji, an internationally trained lawyer from Nigeria, bought a 37-year-old firm wherein he had served as an articling student not long before. Today, Osuji and Smith is a thriving small-sized firm that offers multi-generational and multicultural perspectives to its client base. And that is indeed a powerful story of doing articling someplace and eventually buying it over. So we are honored to have Mr. Charles Osuji join us today.
Thank you.
Charles est l'un des avocats les plus influents du Canada. Il est très, très impliqué dans la communauté, comme Anthony vient juste d'expliquer. Et vraiment, c'est un honneur de l'avoir comme un membre du panel aujourd'hui. La prochaine personne, c'est Madame Rosalie Umuhoza. Elle est originaire du Rwanda et elle est arrivée au Canada en 2002 pour faire ses études au Québec, à Gatineau. Elle a poursuivi ses études dans la faculté de droit de l'Université d'Ottawa. Elle est mariée, elle a 2 enfants et très récemment, sa famille a accueilli 2 autres enfants orphelins placés par le ministère des Services sociaux de la Saskatchewan. Rosalie habite à Regina depuis 2015 et elle est très, très impliquée dans la communauté fransaskoise. Merci de nous avoir rejoints.
Originally from Rwanda, Rosalie Umuhoza came to Canada in 2002 to study at the Université de Québec. She continued her studies at the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. She's married and she's a mother to 2 children. And we're honored to have her join us here today because she represents a strong voice for the Francophone community here in Saskatoon. So thank you for being part of our panel today. Moving on, Raymond Gust. Mr. Raymond joins us from Toronto. He is the Executive Director at Tropicana Community Services. Raymond holds Masters of Law from York University and is a highly experienced mediator and adjudicator. Raymond has also been lead consultant on several nonprofit engagements where he worked to build capacity, shape organizational governance, and achieve alignment of operating pillars for maximum effectiveness. There's only so much I can cram Mr. Raymond's bio into a few lines. And I think already we know we have about 2 human rights specialists joining us on this panel today. How honored we are. Thank you.
Raymond est le directeur exécutif de Tropicana Community Services et il a une maîtrise en droit qui vient de l'Université de York. Et Anthony vient juste énumérer toutes ses contributions à la communauté. La prochaine personne, c'est Roderick Brereton. Il est le fondateur du groupe de changement social transformationnel Urban Res Solutions, qui est la sensibilisation du public et la résolution des problèmes sociaux, l'éducation sociale, la formation professionnelle, l'élaboration des recommandations sur les processus de plainte des employés, des clients et en matière de droits de l'homme et de racisme. Tout ça, ça fait partie de ce qui fait son domaine d'expertise parmi tous les projets qu'il a à gérer. Il propose également des formations sur la diversité, l'équité, l'intégration et la lutte contre le racisme anti-noir. Roderick conçoit et fournit des programmes durables et de qualité. Merci de nous avoir rejoints.
Merci.
Again, there you go. All the way back to Toronto, we have Mr. Roderick Brereton. Roderick is the founder of Transformational Social Change Group, Urban Res Solutions, generating public awareness and resolve on social issues, impacting social education, conducting professional training, developing recommendations on employee and client complaint processes pertaining to human rights, again, and issues surrounding racism are some of the expertise of Roderick. And one of the key components of his special focus is providing training in the aspect of diversity, equity, inclusiveness, and disrupting anti-Black racism. I want to be like you when I grow up. Welcome.
Thank you very much, my brother.
An honor. And that takes us to the last but not the least panelist I would like to introduce today, Ernest Ido. Growing up, Ernest has been involved with lots of youth engagement in his community and home country, Ghana. Mr. Ido is pursuing his tertiary education, which is post-secondary in sociology and French literature. He focuses his research on the works and actions of individuals who sacrificed and are sacrificing their time and life in the pursuit of joy, peace, and freedom of all, and that they offer the effect of their sacrifices for the present day society. Thank you, Mr. Ernest, for your work focus. That's indeed the one that we most need.
Thank you.
Absolument. Comme Anthony vient juste de souligner, Ernest a toujours été impliqué dans sa communauté, avec les jeunes surtout, et couramment, il poursuit ses études en sociologie et dans la littérature française. Et nous sommes ravis de l'avoir comme panéliste aujourd'hui. Alors maintenant, nous allons passer à un message spécial de la part de l'honorable Ahmed Hussen, qui est le ministère des Familles et de l'Enfance et du Développement social. We'll now hear a message from Honorable Ahmed Hussen, who is the Minister for Families, Children, and Social Development. And so, yeah, let's hear it.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. I'm Ahmed Hussen, Minister for Families, Children and Social Development. I'm honored to join you in your virtual celebration of Black History Month. I also want to applaud the work done by Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation and acknowledge the amazing contributions that Black Canadians make to our country every single day. But as we celebrate Black excellence during Black History Month, let us also remember and reflect on those who paved the way, those on whose shoulders we stand on. Let us acknowledge that we must continue their fight to tackle systemic racism and dismantle barriers. Our government, like you, believes in the importance of fighting racism in all its forms and investing dedicated funding to Black Canadian community organizations. That is why together we must continue to build a truly inclusive and stronger Canada. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. We are privileged and indeed honored to have you bring greetings and to call us to action of reflection on the activities and actions of our forebearers, the sacrifices made, the sacrifices being made, and sacrifices and struggles that continues into the future. And it gladdens our hearts knowing that Black history is not indeed a Black people's history. It is a Canadian history, and it reflects in today's action and tomorrow's stories. Now, who's going to tell that story? Black people should tell Black people's stories. And at this point, we would like to invite His Worship, Mayor Charlie Clark, Mayor of the City of Saskatoon, a man who stands for equality, inclusivity, equity, and to the best of my knowledge, and I believe a host, if not all, of Saskatoon residents will attest that His Worship Mayor Clark does not let slide or turn blind eye to any issue that affects racism in the city. And for that, we're extremely grateful. So, Your Worship.
Okay, hello, Anthony, and to you and Bekla, and to all of the organizers, the volunteers, the sponsors, and the very esteemed group of panelists that have come together, and everyone listening, hello, Tansei, bonjour tout le monde. Thank you so much for your leadership in bringing us all together today as we gather virtually here on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. And as we mark Black History Month for 2021, I know that this celebration today and this panel today is also tied to that work of building a stronger treaty relationship in the spirit of Wakotowin, that we are all relatives with one another and that we seek to live, or we must seek to live, in right relationship on this land. We are all shaped by our history, and Black history in our province, in our country, has shaped all of our history, both the painful historical truths of the discrimination and oppression, the systemic anti-Black racism that so many have faced, and also the luminous stories of the contributions that Black Canadians have made in shaping our country, our province, and our community here in Saskatoon. I have been thinking about, through Black History Month, what it would have been like when Dr. Shad arrived to serve people in Kiniston and Saskatchewan in 1896, or the Shiloh Baptists coming from Oklahoma to build a community north of Maidstone, Saskatchewan in 1912. And since those early arrivals, all aspects of our province have been shaped by the contributions of Black people coming here to build a good life, to build stronger communities here over generations. People have shaped the life of our academia, the arts, business, sport, healthcare, community volunteerism. And in my role as mayor, especially in the last year, I've had the privilege of sitting with members of the Black community who have arrived more recently to build a good life here. As part of the many thousands of people who have moved to Saskatoon in the past decade, thousands of people who together have created a much stronger, more diverse and more cosmopolitan city here. And since last summer and the Black Lives Matter movement, I've had especially raw and honest conversations with people, a time of reckoning and truth-telling. I've heard from people a deep commitment to our community, but also a deep desire to be able to fully contribute to the life of our community. And I've heard too many cases where people have continued to face racism which has created real barriers in people's lives, to their employment, to housing, to opportunities to play a leadership role, and where that commitment to contribute to our community is not matched by our community's commitment to ensure that everyone is given a fair chance. The other thing that I've heard in these conversations is from parents and aunties and uncles and grandparents about the deep desire to know that their children are going to have a good future here, to protect tomorrow, as you had said, Anthony, and with the theme of this year's Black History Month. That the children growing up here and the children growing up Black and from all backgrounds, the desire to make sure they'll feel a sense of belonging, to be valued and supported, to love themselves for who they are and see themselves in the future of the city, to stay connected to their roots while also integrated into the diverse fabric of the community. And as a parent, I understand the desire to know that our children are going to thrive. And that is a motivator for me every day to do what I can in my time as mayor to help break down the barriers that people in the Black, Indigenous, people of color in our community are facing, to build a community that lives up to the spirit of Wakotowin. And I know we can only do it together. And so I thank all of the parents and community leaders and students who have shared your realities with me and who are going to share those realities today as part of a panel from right across the country. There's so much to celebrate for Black History Month, and there's so much more to do. I very much look forward to the discussion today as a way of learning more about the steps that we can take together. Thank you very much, Anthony, and to everybody involved.
Thank you so much, Worship, for that great message and building pretty much and leading us on from the message we listened to as delivered by Honorable Ahmed Hussen, talking about the sacrifices and the works done by our forebears, and you had identified some of those who indeed arrived here in Saskatoon or in Saskatchewan, as the case may be. And indeed, our current realities and how we can make certain changes leading into a better future for those of us now, for children who will be adults in future, and indeed, generations unborn. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we look forward to having you stay with us. And like you said, hear more, learn more, and put it all together into how we can better shape our city towards becoming a more socially inclusive and participatory community. Thank you so much, Your Worship. Without further ado, we will roll into the discussions. And we will have them in 3 panel groups, as it were. So we have 3 discussion focuses. One is talking about yesterday, cherishing yesterday. The other is leading us into defending today. And the third focus is more or less around protecting tomorrow. The theme of this panel in and of itself is Black Canadians looking ahead into the futures. As an African, or most people of Black descent will attest to an adage: if you do not know where you're coming from, chances are you may not know where you're headed. And that's why we're starting our discussion today from yesterday. And at this point, I'll turn to Bekla, who will be steering the first set of questions.
For our first discussion, we will be focusing on the awareness of the history and the ongoing contributions of Black Canadians in shaping Canada's heritage and identity since the 1600s until the present day. My first question will be directed to Roderick. On a national scale, how would you describe the level of awareness as regards the history of Black Canadians and their role in shaping Canada's identity since the 1600s or before that until the present day?
All right. Thank you very much for having me before I start. And when I was reviewing this question, I thought about the absence of Black Canadians within Canadian history. And as you mentioned, from the 1600s was the first recorded time that Europeans had documented that Black people had been to this hemisphere, or actually to Canada. And it was an individual by the name of I'm gonna get my French sorted out here, Matthew de Coste. And it was documented in 1608 that he was a Mi'kmaq interpreter, and he was interpreting for the governor of Acadia, which we now know as Eastern Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. And he was that interpreter who was able at that point in time to be able to obviously communicate with the Indigenous and to speak on behalf of the Europeans that he was working for at that point in time. But when I think about that was the first recorded documentation, it means that Matthew de Coste had been here already. He already knew how to speak, this Indigenous language, or the Indigenous already had been to, the African shores, because Matthew de Coste was of African descent. And usually when we're thinking about the beginnings of our country, we haven't had any inclination of Black people being a part of that chemistry, of that formula. And then obviously, as we know, communication is an integral part of building. So, from the time of 1608, when that was documented up until now, we've literally been just not been included within the history books of Canada. I look back to my earlier years, my formative years within the school systems. I'm growing up here in the city of Toronto, and it was pretty much absent. We only knew, quote unquote, of the slavery that we had to endure. And, it literally was started at that point in time where we, through Black History Month, were introduced to, Blacks within the Canadian context. And it's interesting that we were noted as slaves, right? As opposed to being enslaved. And if you think about the difference, if you're a slave, then, that's basically the connotation that, you're less than, you're subordinate, and, you basically have to work for somebody else just based on your inadequacy or your unpreparedness. But when we reverse that to enslaved, I think it takes away enslaved doesn't, it basically, it shows that we were held here by somebody else in bondage when we're enslaved as opposed to being a slave, right? So it's interesting that we never hear the context of being enslaved versus slaves, right? And within the Canadian context, again, within the Black History Month and whatnot, just coming up through the school systems and whatnot, and what has been put out there by mainstream society, it never talks about the European involvement in the enslavement of African people, right? Which is, as we all know, pretty it's harrowing. It's got a long history of abuse, for whether it be sexual, physical, mental, spiritual, and the list goes on in terms of all that Black people were subjected to. And Canadian history does not go into the depths of what Europeans, again, had subjected people of color, and in this case, obviously, the Blacks and Indigenous. And we definitely need to know the truth. And in doing so, there's a demand, I think, that we should have, moving through the years and whatnot, and understanding what we've undergone, the resilience of the Black community, being subjected to, obviously just racism, discrimination, and everything that has been a fight. But our resilience has not given us the opportunity to exude our brilliance to a great degree. And, if you think about, being held down and just being, having to show and prove and, bounce back up, that's a lot of energy. And the intergenerational messages that this is sent also in terms of just being a resilient people as opposed to brilliant has also had an impact on our society in general. If we look at today and some of the disparities that go right across the country from Halifax to Vancouver, there's a lot of similarities that undeniably have reared their heads within our communities. And usually when we're thinking of Black Canadians, it's not a panel that exists of the people who are sitting on this panel today in terms of obviously being highly accomplished, educated, and in the sense of paving a way for other Black Canadians. We usually are just seen through the lens, as we put it, through hip hop, basketball, and crime. And that is an inaccurate way to look at our community. And I think in terms of Black history, we have to now just not look back at our history, look back at the hardships. And then obviously there has been some huge contributions in the sense of the Canadian context and what we've contributed to it. But again, in most cases, it is not put out there. And if it's Black History Month, obviously it happens for the shortest month of the year. And, we are 365 days a year in terms of making Black history and contributing to Black history. So I think as a society now, within this post-George Floyd era, now where the realities of anti-Black racism and discrimination have come to a forefront, and it literally took a disaster for this to come to light, that we now as a society all have to contribute to having that level playing field, having that opportunity to show and prove, and just even in terms of access, to show that we're able and we're willing and we have a contribution to make as Black Canadians. And I think also, just to end up on this, we all have come here to this land. This is Indigenous land, as the person who began the panel today, or the session, talked about the land claim, the Indigenous acknowledgement. We are all immigrants to this land. And in terms of Black people seeming to be just recent, it's not the case. Again, we've been here for centuries, and it's not something that is put out there, but we definitely need to allow other Canadians and ourselves as Black Canadians to know the relevance and our contributions to this land.
Thank you so much for that answer. It's such a great answer for the couple minutes that we had given you to answer it. And I definitely agree that it's not necessarily accurate to pick and choose which lenses we use when looking at our history or when portraying who we are in this space. And definitely, I think there's a lot of honesty and a lot of more truth to be uncovered and shared, and just, yeah, so we can know where we come from and our history and who we are in this land, but also for our colleagues that are from other places to see the same. And yeah, definitely agree. Great point.
And just my last piece. Majority of people in Canada today do not know that Canada had slavery, right? And the founders, quote unquote, of Canada, the European founders of Canada, were slave owners. How many of us know that? Is that a part of the history that we just delete and don't talk about by choice? But that's a reality. And I think we need to know, especially the young people, for our emancipation, our emotional emancipation, and our ability to rise above. We need to know the truth. And the history and the truth will set us free, but we also have to know, the lineage and the fabric that we come from, and just knowing that it's not all glum and dire. It's something that we need to instate within all Canadians, not just Black Canadians. On that note, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Very eloquently expressed and discussed. Thank you so much. We can move on to the next question, which I will pose in French to Ingrid. Alors, quelle est la signification du mois de l'histoire des Noirs pour vous en tant qu'afro-latinoise? Trouvez-vous ça facile ou difficile d'équilibrer votre identité lorsque vous naviguez dans les structures canadiennes?
Bon, ben, merci beaucoup d'abord pour l'invitation. Ça me fait plaisir de pouvoir partager avec vous un peu de ce qui est pour moi les mois de l'histoire des Noirs. Alors, je dirais que c'est plus un moment pour nous souvenir, nous remémorer de tout ce qui a été fait jusqu'à date, de vraiment penser à toutes les personnes qui ont lutté pour nos droits, pour pouvoir être où est-ce qu'on est présentement. C'est un moment également pour pouvoir partager notre histoire, pouvoir partager nos réussites, pouvoir discuter avec les audiences. C'est un mois, on dit les mois de l'histoire des Noirs, mais en même temps, je trouve que c'est bien de pouvoir les partager avec tout le monde. On est tous des Canadiens, on est tous des afro-descendants. Alors, c'est bien de pouvoir partager ce sens d'appartenance avec les gens qui sont nés ici, qui connaissent peut-être un peu moins de notre culture, de l'histoire également. Alors, pour moi, c'est super important de pouvoir partager mes origines avec les gens qui m'entourent tout le temps. Et je vous invite fortement également à le faire aux gens qui sont en train de nous voir. Par la suite, s'il est facile ou difficile d'équilibrer mon identité, je dirais que ce n'est pas une question d'être facile ou d'être difficile. Je pense que ce qui est important, surtout, c'est de vouloir faire quelque chose, c'est de vouloir nous investir, de vouloir participer, faire une empreinte dans la société. Si on souhaite, si on a un rêve, je pense qu'il faut aller le chercher, il faut travailler peut-être même parfois plus fort, mais ce qui pourrait peut-être limiter, c'est souvent quand on nous dit « Ah, tu ne seras pas capable de faire quelque chose, tu ne vas pas arriver à faire quelque chose », alors que ce n'est pas vrai. Là. Souvent, c'est nous autres mêmes qui nous imposons les limites ou les barrières. Ça ne devrait pas être le cas. Je vous donne, par exemple, dans mon cas, moi, dans mon parcours, j'ai toujours rêvé de travailler dans les communications, j'ai toujours rêvé de pouvoir en parler pour les femmes, également de partager un peu ma culture d'origine, alors colombienne ou latina. Mais on m'a souvent dit, non, tu ne vas pas y arriver, tu ne seras pas capable, c'est trop difficile. Cependant, c'est ce que j'ai fait maintenant. Alors, je me dis, pourquoi, si je voulais le faire, pourquoi je vais me limiter, pourquoi je vais m'en empêcher? J'ai travaillé probablement plus fort, mais je me suis également entourée des personnes qui ont cru en moi, qui m'ont soutenue, qui m'ont appuyée, qui m'ont vraiment entourée, qui ont cru surtout dans tout, qui ont vu quelque chose en moi que même moi, je n'arrivais pas à voir. Alors, c'est pareil pour tout le monde. Si on a un rêve, il ne faut pas se limiter parce qu'on nous empêche de le faire. Il faut simplement aller le faire. Si on veut partager notre culture, si on veut être également intégré ou adapté à la société canadienne, comme elle nous a accueillis, bien, il faut le faire. Il faut également dire, OK, j'ai fait partie de ça, je voudrais faire partie du changement, voici ce que je vous propose pour qu'on puisse vivre tous ensemble. Ce n'est pas simplement d'arriver et vouloir imposer quelque chose, mais également de vouloir inspirer les gens qui nous connaissent pour qu'on puisse travailler tous ensemble. Alors, ce n'est pas difficile, ce n'est pas facile, mais il faut vouloir le faire. Il faut vraiment le désirer de tout notre cœur. Et je pense que quand on veut quelque chose avec toutes nos forces, l'univers travaille fort pour le faire. Alors, quand on veut, on peut. C'est ce que je dis tout le temps, là. Puis, il n'y a pas de limite. La seule limite est dans la tête.
Merci beaucoup. En parlant d'inspiration, moi aussi, tu m'inspires de me souvenir que le mois des Noirs, c'est pas nécessairement, ça ne doit pas être concentré sur nous, on peut aussi se concentrer sur ceux qui sont autour de nous et utiliser ça comme une opportunité de partager notre identité, notre histoire, etc. Et vraiment, tes points, donc, quand tu parles de qu'il faut développer cette confiance en soi-même et juste poursuivre ce que tu veux poursuivre, vraiment, ça. Toi aussi, en participant à cette discussion, tu deviens une inspiration, en parlant d'inspiration. Donc, c'est un bon message de partager avec nous. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
So now, I think Anthony is going to ask the next question.
And thank you so much, Ingrid, for that wonderful story, talking about yourself, the challenges faced, the limitations encountered, and your admonition, I would say, encouragement to young people, not to give up, but to recognize that, they can be whatever they want to be. There'll be the roadblocks, but today there you are, a radio presenter. Had you given up, you wouldn't be where you are today. So it's a mercy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And moving forward, I will pose a similar question to Ernest. Ernest is a recent graduate of the University of Saskatchewan, and the question touched pretty much on what does Black History Month hold for you? As a recent graduate whose research work was centered on colonialism and its generational impact. So what significance does this hold for you when you go from the history of colonial experiences and how this has impacted generational peoples, if I can put it that way?
Thank you very much for the question. Merci beaucoup. For the sake of the first presenter, I forgot the name, the one in Toronto. I'm going to answer my question in both French and English. I'll start with English because I'm going to touch some of the things you said. To start with, I'd like to say that history or Black History Month has a very great significance to all of us as Black people, because we talk about Black history, but also for the entire humanity, including all people of different colors. Why? Because everything that affects Blacks affects people of other races too. So I will start by saying that Canada has always been a citadel of hope for people seeking for freedom from slavery at the height of slavery in North America. So the first presenter was saying that Matthew Da Costa was the first person to have been recorded as a Black man to have been in Canada. But then he argued that, or he said that means he had been in Canada for quite some time because he was able to interpret for a Frenchman. That means That means he could understand the people around in order to submit his interpretation to the white man. So I wanted to say that there are parts of our history that are hidden, that are not taught or that are not written anywhere, or you have to make a lot of research to find them. To point to the question that he raised, that Da Costa would have been in Canada earlier than that, earlier than 1608, is true, because there were documented history that pointed out to a king from Mali, a Mali king called the Mansa Abubakar Keita, who embarked on a journey from Mali to find the end of the Atlantic, because he believed that the Niger River has tributaries, has settlement at the other end of the river, so the Atlantic might have other countries beyond it. So he embarked on the journey and put another king as a regent, who is Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa is now known to be the richest king who has ever lived. So there were history of glories of the past that are not documented. And then this Black History Month is an asset in which we will send around awareness about the true history of Black people. And that history has a link to everybody of other race, because whatever affects any human being creates an image of another human being in the world. So I was saying Canada has been a citadel of hope for people seeking for freedom, because Canada has been one, or was the first of the country in the British colony that have managed in 1793 to put some restriction about slavery, when their House of Representatives voted to restrict slavery even before the Abolition Act of 1833. So, and Canadians have welcomed people who ran away from slavery in the US, especially people who ran through the Underground Railroad. And I can cite an example of Elijah McCoy, who had become one of the pioneers who revolutionized the railway transportation by providing the mechanical oiling of engines. He was born in Ontario. He was born of parents who ran away from slavery in US through the Underground Railroad and found asylum in Canada. So many people came to Canada that way and they settled. So Canada has been an asylum for people who ran away from slavery. So that history of that love affair between Black people and Canada has not started today. If Da Costa came to Canada, or was recorded to have been in Canada since 1608, and we have evidence that there have been Blacks who came before him just because they were not known or they were not recorded, that means we have prominent people, a lot of people who have been in Canada just before Da Costa, and they have contributed immensely to the development of Canada. If Canada is welcoming us today as Black Canadians, it has not started today. We have a history for quite a long time. And this history of the Black History Month, I think Kataji, Woodson, and his collaborators have done enough to bring Black history to the limelight. As the first presenter said, that the Black history is not incorporated into the normal school stream in Canada. People don't hear about Black history, but this is a platform that can motivate people who develop curriculum in Canada to incorporate it into the system. So when doing my research, I came across works of so many people. Some are Blacks, some are not Blacks. So every human being is of a particular color. Even among Blacks, there are people of different colors who are Blacks. There are people of different colors who are white. Even there are Blacks who are white, that I call white Negroes. Those are the people who brought the history of Africa to us. Those are the people who wrote about Africa. So I will say that in my own contribution, that The most important, it is not what they have done to us. And the most important, it is what we do about what they have done to us. If our history has been trampled upon, this is a platform for us to bring it into limelight. There's a French philosopher called Jean-Paul Sartre who said that le plus important, ce n'est pas ce qu'on a fait de nous, mais le plus important, c'est ce qu'on fait de ce qu'on a fait de nous. So today, if we are talking about Black history, we are doing something about what they have done to us. We are trying our best to bring into the limelight our history. So Black History Month is of great importance to all of us, all humanity. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great response and for taking us through the historical analysis, as it were. We are quite blessed to have such a team. And again, tying it to that, Dr. White, as a person who has dedicated a significant aspect of your life to education and to educating others and leveraging knowledge, particularly in the aspect of immigrant/refugee/newcomer mental health and well-being, how would you describe the importance of celebrating Black history and the effect such celebrations could have on the sociological and the mental well-being of Black peoples?
So I want to begin by thanking Anthony, to thank you and your team for the invitation. And just to really emphasize that I do need to say that I've been living in Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories. And that is because I am affiliated with the University of Regina, which is located in Treaty 4 territory, whereas I'm now in Treaty 6, or the other way around. And the homeland of the Métis peoples. So, and it's really important for me to keep us saying and recognizing, doing that land acknowledgement over and over again. Anthony, when whoever introduced me, talked about my work, my thesis work, when I did my master's, looking at the issue of isolation as it affected Black women of Caribbean ancestry living in Saskatchewan. And I wanted to say that one of the reasons why I chose to do that work is that I was very involved. I started getting very involved with Black History Month celebrations in the early 1990s in Regina. And I didn't start those celebrations. I wasn't the one who initiated those. I came to this province and they were already taking place. So there were women from the Congress of Black Women from Saskatchewan, Caribbean Canadian, African Canadian Association, and others who had been organizing events for many years. But when I listened to folks speaking, it was always as though folks were talking about us against them, us and them. So they were seeing themselves on the margins even after 15, 20, 30 years of living in the province. And my question to myself was, do I want to live in a province where 30 years later, I'm still feeling as though I'm an outsider? So as we're thinking about mental health and mental well-being, my question is always, what does that do to our psyche if X amount of years later, or every day of my life, I'm still asking myself, do I belong? What does that do to our children? I mean, that whole sense of otherness, even when we've been around for years. The other thing I want to note is that I was also involved in a project organized by the National Organization for Immigrant and Visible Minority Women of Saskatchewan. And there's a national, there's an equivalent that's national, but we had a Saskatchewan component organization. And I got involved with doing a research project looking at post-traumatic stress disorder and the experience of newcomer women. The interview, so I interviewed along with another colleague, Betty Mutwiri. We interviewed, I was the one who did all of the interviews, but we interviewed folks right across the province. The interviews that really had a real profound impact on me were those where women talked about the impact of racism on their mental health and well-being. And so when we're talking about mental health and well-being, and when I'm talking about racism and its impact, I was actually feeling, I was listening to stories of emotional and psychological violence, and we tend to think about violence, as a social worker. I'm also a registered social worker. When I think about violence, we always make sure we emphasize that physical violence is or mental emotional violence is as impactful as physical. Sometimes people will say, well, you didn't get battered. Well, the emotional stuff is hard. And so listening to the stories of racism, listening to the stories of otherness, of feeling that we're on the margins, my question continues to be, what does that do to us? What does that do to the core of us? When we recognize that others don't see our strengths, don't see or understand the richness of our cultures, that they don't know that many of us have been here for many generations, that we're not outsiders. So for me, when I think about Black History Month, and why Black History Month, and how can it have, what is its relationship to mental health and well-being, I think of several things. I think Black history gives us an opportunity to continue to share our stories, to enter solidarity with one another, to build alliances. And I have to say here that it's been such a privilege to work with Mayor Charlie Clark, because this is somebody who I think, Charlie, I see you as wanting to walk the talk. So it's about solidarity, alliances, letting others know about our contributions, our histories. And for the mainstream, it's about making what seems to be invisible visible. It's about trying to create transformation. And it's an opportunity to highlight and bring about change with respect to misinformation, the stereotypes, etc. I think it's important in terms of looking at diversity, equity issues, inclusions in the classroom and in the workplaces. One of the things I want to say is Black History Month is particularly important for those of us who live in smaller provinces, and for those of us who live in places where the population, where the numbers of Black people, where those numbers appear to be small, not huge. Because it's a different kind of work that we need to do, because folks don't understand that if it's one person, it's two persons. We need to think about that, because sometimes the isolation in those areas is even more intense because there's nobody else that folks can truly be themselves and share those issues. So for me, Black History Month allows me and all of us to share stories about the complexities of the history. There's good stuff that has happened, and there's some pretty yucky stuff that's happened. I think we have to fill the gaps, avoid the superficial approaches. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. Very well said. And I honestly could never have enough listening to you and the wisdom with which you speak. And Mayor Clark, my screen here, you are right in the middle of everyone else. So it's like, you're right in the middle of it all. We will flank you, as they would say in my home country, Nigeria. I will flank you, but in a good way. And I see you kind of taking notes. So that's all good stuff. So before we move to the next discussion focus, I wondered if there's anyone else who may have one or two comments to add to the focus with which we've discussed. And just to give a quick recap, it is in the area of the awareness on the historic and ongoing contributions of Black Canadians in shaping Canada's heritage and identity since the 1600s until the present day. And please feel free to comment in your language of comfort, i.e. English and or French. As an organization, Truly Alive is committed to advancing Canada's official languages of English and French. And we only have a minute for that. So if there's anyone who has a little bit of something to say, Dr. Zita, and it's interesting you're raising your hand because you're going to be my next person to reach. So either you want to save that for then or still coming to talk to you.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the historical context because I wanted to add it to my discussion, but I feel like it would take it back. So let me just make that comment now. I go with the first speaker, and it is important to realize that when we talk about Black people in Canada, even though I identify as African because I came here in my mid-20s, and I had to, undergo a whole process of understanding who I was as a Black person. Back home in Ghana, everybody's Black, and so race was not an issue that you had to, think on. But when you transport yourself to a country like Canada, it is difficult, and you have to make a quick adjustment that when you walk around, people see you as a Black person, and that is it. Tying into the historical context, I want to talk about Viola Davis Desmond. So she went to a theater in Nova Scotia, and she sat in the white section, and she was dragged out and mistreated. And she was charged based on tax evasion. Why? Because Canada does not have explicit segregation laws like it did in America. So she was charged on the basis of tax evasion because, of course, sitting in the white section, comes with a different tax system when you're sitting in the balcony, which is the Black section. And so I make reference to this analogy to say that it has been the approach of Canada to talk about issues of racism, especially their anti-Blackness. Even as an academic, we are doing this national research project. And when we go on meetings, every time they talk about issues of, racism and discrimination, it is linked to Indigenous people. So Canada always, our issue of racial discrimination has to do with Indigenous people. If it is Black, then it has to do with America. Black people's struggles and even contributions in Canada, I go with Roderick, has not been at the forefront and is not acknowledged. And it is this thing of not having the straight policy, of segregation. They don't have it in their laws. So Canada, I always say that, it's always convenient. They does not, acknowledge the level of anti-Blackness. And that is because of this history of not having clear-cut laws that discriminated against Black people, unlike America that had the clear-cut segregation laws. And so it's very nuanced, it's very complicated, but there is, pervasive issues of anti-Blackness in Canada, and I wanted to tie it to that historical context.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. Komolafe has his hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be very brief. And
please,
since we're talking about the past, the context from which I want to approach it is the need for us to ensure that we share our history with our children, particularly those of us who are first-generation immigrants in Canada. When you come into Canada with children who are 6, 8, and 12 years old, and they have lived in Canada for a while, it's imperative that we share the history of where they are from with them so that it becomes a part of their identity and they are proud to own it. They need to understand that they come from a heritage of kings, a heritage of people who are educated, people who are industrious, people who have a background that they ought to be proud of. Added to that, there is a need for us to also unearth the history of the earliest Black people who came to Canada. And Dr. Zita took that from me, the history of Viola Desmond, for instance. Yes, she went through racial discrimination, but she still ended up becoming the first known Black female millionaire in Canada, in spite of the oppression and discrimination that she experienced. And there are several other Black people or people of African descent who have thrived from so many years back in spite of the oppression and discrimination that they experienced. So I think we need to share such history with our children so that going forward, they are proud of their heritage, and that can encourage them to make something of their experience in Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I see Roderick, we already have the floor. It seems like everybody's like pro Roderick now. So I don't know if you can also please as brief and quick as possible.
Yes,
so
just really quick thing. And I think when we look at Canadian history, we have to look at the presence of violence. We never look at the presence of violence in terms of how we were enslaved. Because the threat of violence, and as Dr. White talked about, emotional, spiritual, physical, sexual, every aspect of violence was a part of our context. And it wasn't us who was subjecting each other to that. That's always left out of the history books. And to this day, there has never been a national day of atonement, reconciliation, or even dialogue to speak about the wrongs that were done to African Canadians. And my last point, and I just learned this recently, majority of people who were brought here against their will to these shores of North America, number one, were married if you were an adult, right? When we look at the city of Toronto today, we never would know that because 2/3 of all family households in the city of Toronto are now led by a single parent, right? We would never know that the 90-something% of the Africans who were brought here were married on those ships. We also didn't know that the majority of them were educated. If you think about, North America, Canada, United States, the Caribbean and whatnot, we built it. We had an integral piece in building it. We couldn't just build it if we didn't have any knowledge of how to do it. Again, that always gets left out of the story too. So I think it is imperative that we see it from another lens, and we have to relentlessly demand that the story be told, not half a story. And as we know, the dominant culture always tells his story, if you understand what I'm saying, right? It's usually from a male context. In this sense, a European male has told the story, so that's the context and the Kool-Aid that everybody is ingesting, digesting, and regurgitating. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a great team of thinkers, I would say, but thinkers who are passionate about their community. And all I'm hearing is a conversation that reflects we as opposed to I. And that's indeed the goal. So thank you so much for all that you're sharing with us. And you, in fact, have steered the conversation into the next one, which is literally talking about what has been done at the government level, including community level, and what are those gaps in services that we can identify and indeed say it as it is. Oftentimes, not naming the elephant in the room is where the problem starts. And sometimes we, as peoples, either Black, Indigenous, or people of color, from what I'm hearing, we get too comfortable with the mainstream definition of self that we don't even, the Black person may not even know how to say that they are Black. I'm almost always even afraid to say that I'm Black myself. So why is that? And so leading to this next question, talking about the national government efforts and community level actions that has been done or that's being done, and what gaps in services are there as may be applicable to addressing Black Canadian or Black people's issues. And I'm going to start with Dr. Zita. As a Black woman living in Canada, how do you consider the importance of equitable representation in community and organizational leadership? What is your consideration of equitable representation versus tokenism, and also community and or organizational leadership?
Thank you for that question. And I think that this question was, God sent to my way, because it is something that I have been talking about. I feel there is a huge lack of representation, especially of Black people across board. As a young academic, before COVID, every time I get to teach and I enter a classroom, the African students are just overjoyed. They're like, this is the first time I'm having a Black professor. And it saddens my heart, and it's like they feel this sense of belonging, and they are able to participate in class, because I tend to use a very dialogic way of teaching. It's a discussion. And so they tell their friends, like, you need to take the sociology class. This is the first time, I have a Black prof. And it is a huge issue. And the statistics and the numbers are there to prove that. Just post George Floyd, a lot of Canadian educational institutions have been doing a fast track hiring of Black faculty. That is an admission of the lack of representation. And I've been getting a lot of those emails like, oh, this university is doing a fast track Black faculty, because they lack it. Interestingly, among my circles, I know 20 Ghanaians who have PhDs. As an immigrant in the Ghanaian community, I remember when I came to Canada in 2012, they told me that what we do here is to do a master's and do a PhD. That is the route. I'm like, wow. And over the years, that has been the level of orientation that we have. And I'm sure it's similar to Nigerians, because when you look in America, Nigerians are the most educated immigrant group. And so it is important that, we are extremely educated, but in terms of representation, it is not there. And even though I cite academia as the case study, it trickles down, to all aspects. I do a lot of community engagement, and I visit different places, and it's like, wow, you're the first Black person to come here to talk to us about this. So I feel there needs to be a change. Hopefully we move from the verbal commitment, and I'm glad Mayor Clark is on, and I'm open to having, fruitful long-term discussions with him on how we can move forward, because every time it's Black History Month, we make an amazing speech and that is it. But it is time for action. It is time to see inclusivity across board in all sectors. There are many Black people that are doing amazing, that are incredible, that can fill positions. But according to research that was conducted in 2018, I think it is on the global news, that Canada have a higher rate of discrimination when it comes to employment. And so research was conducted and certain names were used. And it was not just, it was Canada, the USA, France, UK, and Canada was high with the UK and France, and America was at the bottom with what, a 30% level of discrimination, where Canada had close to 60% discrimination on hiring based on applicants' names. And so there is a lot to be done in terms of representation. It is not just an academic problem. I believe that it cuts across board, and Canada needs to be doing better.
Thank you so much, and that's a great way to start a conversation. And we will still come back to other panelists to share their thoughts. But moving on, I'm going to invite Raymond at this point to. We've talked about the gaps, as Dr. Zita had mentioned, and the minimal or lack thereof of Black people in positions of authority or representation. Dr. White made reference to focusing on smaller communities, such as Saskatoon, where we're at, because the size of the community also could be deterrent to how visible or invisible a group might be. Now, I'm going to link this to the popular adage, which goes as, if you go alone, you will go fast, but if you go together, you will go far and maybe even further. So I'd like to ask you, like, what is your take on building solidarity and leveraging network across Black-led organizations, Black-owned businesses from coast to coast to coast? That is number one. Number two is, what support do you consider necessary to facilitate this coast to coast collaboration amongst Black Canadians and indeed other ethnic minority groups? Two questions to an individual who we know is capable of.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, the team at Truly Alive. Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge His Worship. Thanks for being here today. It's a two-part question. So there's I guess lots to cover here, and I'm probably going to talk a lot about a project that Tropicana is involved in the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative. But before I do, I'll just say I just want to take a moment to say that Tropicana Community Services is located in Scarborough, Ontario, and that land is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. With respect to your first question, I think of the many ways that we as individual Black people have faced anti-Black racism, and only we as Black people know what it is to walk in our skin, and each of us knows what it is to try and take up this fight alone. We know how hard it is at times when we may face some inequity or anti-Black racism and have to process it and deal with it, or if we are advocating for a family member, a child, we know about those ways we've tried to or have had to go it alone, so to speak. But we're also aware of the many different forums and initiatives and other ways that we've come together to try and address it collectively. And many of us on this call, I'm sure, can recount and recall the pain of the failure of some of those well-intentioned initiatives. But today, I think of the important work being done between the Black community and the Canadian government. That work that's being done through the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiatives. And other important projects like the Black Business Opportunity Fund, the Black Entrepreneurship Program, and other such important projects. But again, particularly the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative, because as you know, Tropicana is one of the taking on a leadership role in that project as one of the intermediaries that's flowing that funding. But that project is making Black history right now, today. It's driving a level of collaboration and solidarity with and between Black people at the national level. And so when I think of the work that's being done, when I think of the ways in which collaborative relationships are being formed, that commitment to collaboration within our community, amongst ourselves, is so important. And we're seeing it happen in ways I think probably like never before. So the various partnerships and collaborative relationships that are being established are critical pieces of a community practice that's going to far outlive the project itself. So that's one piece, and that's, I think, one piece of the framework that we have to pay attention to and work on to ensure that we are not always, though it's necessary sometimes, going alone, but we're going together. Again, in keeping with that old African proverb. The other piece, I think, though, And this ties back to the comment that His Worship made and my brother made a little earlier, and I just can't remember his name, but they both talked about how Black history is really everybody's history. It's because our histories are intertwined. You know, when you can proceed safely through an intersection, when that traffic light changes, whether you're Black, white, Asian, you're able to do that because a Black person invented the traffic light. If you've had open heart surgery, if you've got someone in your family, a loved one who's had it, that's happening because it was a Black surgeon that perfected the means of the part of the means of doing that. So our histories are intertwined. So I think that that ties to the other piece, which I think is that of allyship and bridge building. You know, the work of advancing the cause of equity for Blacks and others has always been accomplished in solidarity, and not only in solidarity, not only among Black people, but also with those outside the community. The call to end slavery, the abolition movement, you know, began in the pulpits of white churches, right? The churches that slave owners went to in England. Thinking of, though it was tenuous, the Civil Rights Act in America, the Civil Rights Movement in America. It needed that presidential support to get that done. So it means that while allyship and partnering and bridge building with those outside our community or outside our own experience is critical. And we need to couple that together with the cause and the need for us to work together, not only to advocate, but the work of continuing to heal as a people, continuing to seek to recover what's been lost. This kind of work is critical because dealing with trauma and is no easy thing. And when we think about, you know, my friend talked about the mental health issues of just the constant strum of exclusion at times. Dealing with trauma is no easy thing, and dealing with generational trauma is even less so. And generational trauma coupled with just persistent exclusion and discrimination is even less easy to deal with. So those two pieces together, I think, are critical in driving the cause forward. We want to be, I think, builders of bridges between one another, as well as builders of bridges, establishing linkages with anyone who wants to partner with us in that cause. So when we can establish those linkages where we can build, where trust can be built, and where necessary, where rebuilding bridges, where trust has been lost, I think that those components are also critical. So those are some of my thoughts around your first question.
Yeah.
You asked about some of the work, some of the things that are necessary to facilitate a coast-to-coast collaboration among Blacks. And I think over the years, and we can all, this is such a shared experience for so many of us, but, you know, over the years, there really has been a strong awareness among Black Canadians for the need for some kind of organization or work that represents or advocates or otherwise takes up the Black community's cause and concerns on a national scale. And so again, you know, my mind turns to the work of the Supporting Black Canadian Communities initiatives as, you know, I was going to say a starting point, but it really is not a starting point. It really is a culmination of agitation and advocacy that has been going on the part of others who came before us. You know, so I think of the Jean Augustines, the Alvin Curlings, the Marianne Chambers, the Lincoln Alexanders, and so many others that have gone before. I think of the work of the UN Pad Push Coalition and Meeting of the Minds that has laid a lot of the groundwork to drive advocacy for the, in accordance with the UN United Nations Decade for People of African Descent, which led directly to the funding that is now funding the Supporting Black Communities initiative. And so we're standing on the shoulders of individuals who have shed tears and hours and to bring all of this to fruition. So the SBCCI, the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative, really is not the starting point. It's really a culmination and in many ways a beginning for what's to come. And I just think of the networks of collaborative relationships that are being formed through this project. As I said, those are all critical pieces in creating a community of practice that's going to outlive the project itself. See, right now we are seeing the formation of a Black nationwide intermediary sector in Canada. And I don't think the historical significance of that it really can't be overstated. This is the first time in the story or the history of Black Canadians' relationship with the federal government that the government is flowing this kind of funding to the Black community, but through Black organizations. And it's really just the beginning. And so I think, in terms of linkages, in terms of solidarity, when we as a community declare and commit to that catch cry, nothing for us without us, it really is a powerful and unifying force. And this project, the Supporting Black Canadians Communities Initiative, is evidence of that. It's a demonstration of the fact that our unified voice, indeed, it really does have potency. Because the use of the intermediary model is a tacit recognition that as Black people, we best know our lived experience, and we best know the needs that arise from that experience. And therefore, we are best equipped to design the processes and administer the resources directed towards those needs. So I think that the ways in which we are making Black history today and looking forward to what is yet to come, it's an exciting time. It is such a very exciting time. I think to myself that, and I have 4 kids. I have 4 children, and I think about legacy, as we all do, as we start to get a little bit older, we get a little more gray in the beard. We start to think about legacy. We start to think about the world that we're going to leave behind for our children. And so I want to, when my kids and for their kids, my grandkids ask me what I did with the moment that I had. I want to be able to, and I know all of us do, we want to be able to speak well of that. So, my hope, the hope of this organization, Tropicana, is for a thriving Black community that participates and contributes fully in the economic, the legal, social, and political life of this great country. And that's what the project is about. It's about changing Black lives by enhancing the capacity of the organizations that touch those lives. And so, the generation to come, I say to folks, and they kind of look at me a little strange sometimes. I ask them, I say, what is the one thing that only Black people can contribute to this world? And it's not the only thing we can contribute, but it is the thing that only we can contribute, and that is more Black people. And so when I think about the context in which we bring more Black lives into existence, I think about the stories we tell them, how we will raise them, how we will prepare them. And I want to be a producer of a generation of young Black people who are able and ready to shoulder the responsibilities and challenges that are inevitably going to be theirs to master. And, you know, I want, you know, a community where Black children grow up knowing that they can be whatever they want to be. The choice is broad in front of them, and there's just no question in their minds that they can go wherever their ambition or imagination will lead them. And so I just think for Black youth, for Black people everywhere, if any message I could sum up would be, we must lead. We must lead, and not just in our community and for our community's sake. We have to lead for everybody's sake, because the work to make Black lives better, we know that work makes all lives better, right? And so I'd say to young Black people, don't seek to be the first Black person to do a thing, right? Seek perhaps instead to be the first person ever to do a thing. Lead in that way, and the future will be bright. So I think the work going on now, critical pieces of driving our cause forward.
Right. Thank you so much, Raymond. I'm not quite sure how to build or add on what you've said, and that was quite eloquently presented. I totally share your view on all fronts, and I agree with you that for and by is an important component of human existence. And telling the story by the people who own the story and telling it as it relates to their feeling and experiences brings meanings to that which is being shared. I always say that it's not that which is written by us, but that which is told to us by our forebears. Because oftentimes when it's written, a lot of context either intentionally or unintentionally kind of like kept away. So thank you so much. And indeed, I agree with the need to build or have more Black people. My wife, I suppose, is watching from home right now, and we only have 2 boys. So I'm not sure what you mean about that, but I totally understand what you mean. We need to be each other's sisters and brothers and parents and grandparents, as the case may be, and be that face, that role model for that next young and aspiring Black youth that they can look up and say, that's one person that looks like me. That's my daddy. That's my mommy. That's my auntie, which is very common in the history of Black people. Everybody's an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a sister. We're all related. So thank you for that great comment. And at this point, we'll pass it on to Bekla, who will be asking the same question about service gaps, but particularly in the Saskatoon Francophone community. Bekla.
Merci, Anthony. La prochaine question sera posée à Rosalie. Et la question est, pensez-vous qu'il existe des lacunes dans les services, en particulier en ce qui concerne les communautés noires francophones, qui nécessitent une attention particulière?
Oui, en fait, je dirais qu'il y a plusieurs lacunes au niveau des services. Pas parce qu'il n'y a pas de services disponibles pour les aider, mais juste parce que les services qu'on a ne sont pas, selon moi, adaptés aux besoins des personnes noires ici dans la province. Plus précisément, par exemple, en matière de santé mentale, les services qui sont disponibles pour les francophones noirs, pour le moment, sont très récents. Et ceux qui sont récents sont peut-être disponibles seulement en français. Mais la majorité des gens de couleur noire souvent réclament pouvoir consulter des psychologues ou des professionnels parlant de la même langue pour juste se sentir à l'aise et aussi avoir un peu plus de confiance. Donc ça, c'est des éléments de lacune qu'on trouve. Mais à part la santé mentale, on trouve aussi toujours au niveau de la communauté de Noirs l'élément de manque d'information. Et là, c'est souvent parce que je dis pas que c'est seulement la blâme de la communauté noire, mais aussi au niveau du gouvernement, il n'y a pas une sensibilisation assez forte pour que les gens de la couleur noire puissent aller trouver ces informations-là. De l'autre côté, il y a une part de la communauté, bien sûr, qui, eux aussi, ne cherchent pas assez d'informations pour s'instruire ou tout simplement pour apprendre un peu plus sur les services disponibles. D'autres lacunes qu'on retrouve, c'est au niveau de l'aide aux étudiants étrangers, par exemple, qui viennent des pays francophones africains, qui viennent à l'université. Des universités, la majorité des universités sont tous anglophones. Et souvent, c'est pas évident d'avoir des services assez disponibles en français pour les aider. Je dirais aussi, l'autre lacune qui revient souvent, c'est la langue, hein, la langue dans tous les services. Et ça, c'est vraiment dans tous les services confondus. Il n'y en a pas beaucoup de services ici en Saskatchewan disponibles en français, ni dans les langues d'origine. Alors, ça devient de plus en plus difficile pour les personnes noires n'ayant pas le français comme première langue ou l'anglais comme première langue ici en Saskatchewan, de pouvoir bénéficier des services qui sont disponibles. Alors oui, les lacunes, il y en a en matière socio-culturelle, en matière de développement économique. Si on n'a pas beaucoup d'entrepreneurs ici dans la province de couleur noire, c'est pas parce qu'il n'y a pas de Noirs qui veulent faire ça, c'est juste qu'il n'y a pas des services assez forts et qui s'adaptent à la réalité. Donc, j'insiste beaucoup, les services existent, mais les services qui existent présentement ne s'adaptent pas à la réalité des personnes noires. Et c'est là on retrouve plusieurs personnes ayant des diplômes, mais qui n'ont pas été reconnus, par exemple, ou tout simplement les gens qui ont tous les atouts nécessaires, mais qui ne savent pas, qui n'ont pas de l'information, ou tout simplement qui sont limités au niveau des de moyens financiers, au niveau de recours disponibles, au niveau juridique, par exemple. Donc, tout ça, c'est des éléments qui fait que leur service devient assez limité quand c'est à propos des services à rendre au niveau des francophones ou tout simplement des personnes noires dans la province.
Merci beaucoup pour cette réponse. Et vraiment, c'est vrai qu'il y a beaucoup de services qui devraient s'adapter à la réalité d'aujourd'hui, au fait que les personnes noires ne sont pas en train de recevoir les services qui sont en train de combler leurs besoins. Et vous avez aussi souligné que la langue, la plupart des fois, c'est le plus grand obstacle à pouvoir, je ne sais pas, confronter et pouvoir devoir s'ajuster comme une personne noire qui ne parle pas nécessairement la langue, qui cherche un service quelconque, que ce soit pour la santé mentale, que ce soit pour la santé en général ou les services sociaux, comme vous dites. Donc, il y a définitivement beaucoup de défis là. La prochaine question est pour Gédéon. Et en tant que jeune homme noir et leader émergent ici à Saskatoon, quels sont, selon vous, les défis auxquels les Canadiens noirs sont confrontés en matière de sentiment d'identité et d'inclusion? Et pensez-vous que les jeunes noirs ont le sentiment que leur voix et leurs idées comptent dans l'ensemble des affaires de la société par rapport à leurs amis ou leurs collègues qui ne sont pas noirs? Je pense que tu es toujours sur mute.
I apologize. I was saying that for the sake of time, I'm going to keep it in English as I prepared my points in English. So for youth, when speaking in Saskatoon and from my lived experiences as well, I find that with regards to identity and inclusion, there are many barriers, but the biggest one is the disconnect between the services that are supposed to be promoting such topics and the members that they're being targeted towards, which is in this case, the youth. So we have a point where the services that are being offered, there is not the nothing about us without us method approach. So then that leads to lots of activities, and whether it's programs are not being attended by the youth because of that. And we can also see this happening with regards to like amplified, by the COVID-19. Because on top of that now, since everything's virtual, you have the Zoom fatigues that are coming in, where then there is even less participation, and therefore you feel less included in your community. And I would just like to highlight that this is from my peers' perspective. There is no research done on this. It's just a sentiment that I get in the community. For the second point, which is with regards to our voice and insights being heard versus our peers, the non-Black Canadians, I would say, the simple answer is no, once again. And the reason because of that is because we most immigrants, once again speaking, like from my perspective, the way I see it is that there are other needs that are being fought to be attained. So you have new immigrants, we're talking range 3 to like 0 years in Canada. You have the language barriers that you're facing. You have the high school treatments, inclusion in high school, the way free lunch programs may be provided, all of that. You have youth who are facing that. And on top of that, they will not have the time to try and join, whether it's youth advisory groups or whatever, to try and get their voices heard because of those issues. Lastly is the awareness. Rosalie talked about that, which was with regards to all these opportunities that we may have as youth that are not being taken advantage of because we have not heard of those services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was quite a quick and a well-captured one, and we will continue to do the best we can as an organization and in collaboration with other sectors to see how we can best support and continue to listen to, involve in, and indeed allow Black youth the platform to not only thrive, but also to attain that which their mind is set to. So thank you so much, Julian, for that beautiful feedback. But now that takes us to, so we've discussed more or less yesterday what we need to defend today. So we need to defend the youth. We need to provide a platform for the youth. We need to give them, we look at them, matter of fact, at Truly Alive as emerging leaders, because oftentimes we say youth are leaders of tomorrow. At this organization, we say youth are leaders of tomorrow starting today, because tomorrow will be another tomorrow and another tomorrow, which means youth may never get the table or the platform to thrive. So now leading to our next segment, in the interest of time, we want to look forward into the ways through which we can achieve equitable representation of Black Canadians, be it youth, women, men, family, non-binary, all that makes Black peoples. We want to look into how can we achieve equitable representation as it regards to social, political, economic, and all of the fabric of the community towards not only sharing their insights, not for photo optics at the table, but having equal voice and being regarded as people that have insights to share. And our first individual that will be reaching is Mr. Akomalafe. You work with Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. You are a lawyer for many, many years, and you are indeed an individual who believes in equitable representation and to have all faces at the table, but not at the table, but a voice heard. So what does economic equity and fair representation mean to you? And is there any affirmative action to increase the representation of ethnic minorities, including Black Canadians, in the areas of employment, education, and cultures from which they have been historically excluded? Because all we've been saying now already points to there's a historic analysis that goes to the alienation or exclusion of Black people or other ethnic minorities. So is there any affirmative action, maybe in Canada? And how would you suggest that we attain more visible representation?
Right. Thank you very much, Anthony. And a big thank you to the TAYFFI team for having me. Very quickly, being mindful of time, to start with economic equity. It's important to understand, first of all, that it is a human right for every member of the human society, human community to be able to participate in economic activities to ensure that they maximize their potential. If you look at Article 22 of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights and several other human rights legislations, you will see that participation in economic activities is regarded as a human right. And when we talk about economic equity, it's important to understand that it is premised on the foundation of the inviolable right of every human being to be treated with dignity, and to understand that all human beings are created equal. That is the foundation of economic equity. So when we see one another as equal, then we need to provide equal opportunity for everyone to access economic activities in their community. And that is the starting point. So creating a level playing field for everyone to access economic activities, understanding that each person deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone who wants to work should be given an opportunity to work, and there should be a level playing field for doing that. It's also important to understand that when we talk about accessing economic activities from a human rights perspective, there is an imperative to address systemic barriers that prevent people from attaining and maximizing their potentials in the workplace. And this is more so when one takes into consideration that there are prohibited grounds on account of which a person cannot be discriminated against, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the receipt of public assistance or government service, or any of those other areas provided for under human rights legislation. So that is where we need to start from when we talk about economic equity and fair representation. There cannot be fair representation if there isn't economic equity. And we cannot have economic equity if we don't hold as sacrosanct the fact that all human beings are equal and need to be treated with dignity. And talking about whether there is affirmative action to accomplish or to achieve economic equity and fair representation. Yes, there is. In Canada, for instance, there is at the federal level, the Employment Equity Act, which a number of provinces have also borrowed from, whether to have to enact their own legislation, or more importantly, from the human rights perspective, there are provisions in human rights code which ensure that affirmative action, as you have put it, can be achieved. For instance, in Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code in Section 55 provides for the Human Rights Commission, that's the body that administers the Human Rights Code, to either initiate or approve an employer's initiative to remove or reduce systemic barriers that groups of people experience in the workplace. The Employment Equity Act at the federal level and the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code, for instance, recognize 4 equity groups. We have women in underrepresented occupation, we have Indigenous people, we have visible minorities, and people with disabilities. These constitute the 4 recognized equity groups. And let me say very quickly that the fact that those are the 4 equity groups does not mean that if a group of people can satisfy the requirements under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code, for instance, it doesn't mean that they cannot also be designated an equity group. In fact, they can be, and there are provisions for that. But currently, those are the 4 equity groups recognized under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code. And then the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code provides for employers to be able to have plans or programs by which barriers experienced by those 4 equity groups can be removed or reduced, either through a hiring process or a retention process or promotion process, which focuses on those equity groups. For instance, women in underrepresented occupations. And I'm glad that His Worship Mayor Charlie Clark is here. If you look at the city of Saskatoon, the government of Saskatchewan, and several other employers, they have their own employment equity plans by which they focus on specific equity groups to reduce or remove the barriers that they experience. Importantly, for the employment equity program under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code, there is what we call equity targets, which takes into consideration the percentage representation of those equity groups in the general population and the percentage representation in the workplace. So, for instance, for women in underrepresented occupation, the percentage of women who can work in Saskatchewan based on Statistics Canada's census of 2016 is 47%. So the employment equity target for women in Saskatchewan is 47%. And then you have 10.2% for visible minorities, you have the percentage for Indigenous people and the percentage for people with disabilities. And what we have found over time is, yes, employers are working towards it. They have not yet met the target, but gradually there is traction in the direction of reducing or removing barriers in the workplace, particularly systemic barriers faced by members of those equity groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And there's so much I've unpacked within the 2 to 3 to 5 minute discussion there. So I'm pretty sure we can't say it all in one day. And just so we're aware, Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation, under its Diversity and Inclusion Program, is putting together a team of representation across Saskatoon Black Canadian community. So we will be communicating to the city and indeed the mayor as we progress in forming this team, which represents Black peoples living here in this city across African and North and South and East, and indeed the Caribbean, and all places where you have migrated here and making this place home. So stay tuned. Now we'll go to Mr. Charles Osuji, who has patiently been listening, and I've been seeing him taking notes. And as I mentioned, Mr. Charles bought over the firm where he had his actor cleaned, which I think many people will be wondering how he did that. So many Black Canadians, as you will agree with me, have lorry loads of innovative and amazing business ideas. However, many are unsure, on how to go about this and how to get started. Some will indeed argue that structures and systemic racism or issues, place several barriers in the way of Black Canadians. It's not so much about the barriers they've brought. It is the barrier that they have come to meet. And all of this make it very difficult to attain their full potential. So as a successful lawyer and a business owner, what advice do you have for Black Canadians and all people of color watching you at this point in time, and who may be hopefully benefiting from your success story? Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Anthony. And to the rest of the panelists, I am very inspired. I have about 2 pages of notes I've been taking, hearing about the information about how we came here, or the history of the few people that came before us. I came to Canada in 2011. I was a lawyer already in Nigeria at the time, and few years later, I joined this office as a student, and then I took over. Again, everything happened very quickly, but a few things led to that happening. For instance, first of all, I became aware of my Blackness for the first time when I came here. I remember one of our presenters talking about that. And that's the reality. Back in Nigeria, where I come from, I wasn't, my identity as a Black man wasn't prominent, wasn't front and center at the back of my mind. But when I came here, it became a reality that I had to deal with, right? I also had to deal with the fact that I left everything that I knew back in Nigeria. I left my professional network. I was professional naked, so to speak, when I came here. I had to start all over to reinvent myself, build a network for myself. And then also, I was hopeful that the Canadian community would accept me. So there was also the issue of acceptance. Would people accept me, especially being a professional? Would people trust me enough to give me their work and all of that? So the barriers are quite real. And I mean, 2-3 minutes will not be enough to talk about the barriers a Black person faces. More so a young Black professional, whether the person wishes to enter into the industry or wishes to continue to hustle and toil. So the barriers are very real. I've found a few things that have been very helpful in my journey so far. I remember when the opportunity to take over the firm came about, every part of me rejected that idea. I thought it was going to be a crazy idea, the risks and all of that. But a few things have helped in my journey. Number one, having a tribe of supporters. That is very, very important. Whatever you wish to do, you want to work for someone, you want to start your own business, make sure you have a tribe of supporters, people that actually understand the unique struggles that face you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a student, whatever endeavor you are in. And be proud to identify yourself as Black. It's very, very critical. Many business owners, they shy away from identifying with their kind. It's actually a benefit, it's actually a humongous advantage for you to identify yourself as Black. Number three, make sure that you're focusing on adding value to whoever you're providing services to, whether your clients, customers. Make sure that you're focusing on excellence, learning a lot about your industry, building your repertoire of knowledge, increasing your information about the particular industry that you're catering to. Because I keep saying this, at the end of the day, what people really want is someone that can help them, right? That's really what people really want. Someone that can take them from point A to point B and provide them with the assistance that they need, that they're paying for. And that is really the basic fundamental need of anyone coming to us for our product or services. And if you're able to do that, you quickly realize that some of the barriers that are there, the hurdles, they start disappearing. People will come back again and again if you're able to provide them with the services that they deserve. I've never had a client come to me and say, you know what, Charles, I don't like your accent. I think I'm going to hire someone else. I've not had a client come to me and tell me that, Charles, I don't know where you went to school. I don't know what degree, your grades in school and all of that. But, when they look at the services that I'm providing, when they realize that I've helped them go from the very dark moment of their life to somewhere bright, they come back again and again, they refer people to us. So for young Black entrepreneurs, people looking to start a business, people looking to nurture an idea and actually expand on the idea, identify with your tribe, ensure that you seek mentorship and be very deliberate about mentorship. Some people have told the path you're looking to tow. So people have been in that particular industry, they've succeeded. Make sure you identify with them and have some relationship that is consistent with them. And finally, ensure that you add value in whatever you're doing. Make sure that you understand your industry very well, improve yourself, put a lot of effort in capacity building, because at the end of the day, that is what's going to differentiate you from others, because there's so many obstacles ahead of you. There's so many barriers, and you just have to do the best you can to overcome them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was powerful, Charles. And I want to be like you when I grew up. And moving on to, which is indeed more like our last question for this panel. Education, they say, is the best legacy. And I believe many of us would agree to this. However, many Black Canadian/newcomer students face subtle discrimination and racism in various forms. And I'd like to share, and I'm glad the mayor is still here and Dr. Judy is here and the rest of us across the country were out here. I'd like to share at this point a real life experience as narrated by one of our youth here in Saskatoon, but who himself identified as a Black Canadian who came as an international student at a point in time. And this will lead us into the next conversation.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you to Truly Allow Foundation, otherwise known as TAYFFI, for putting together and organizing this Black History Month celebration program and inviting me to speak at this program. My name is Femi Yusuf, and I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Ibadan, Nigeria. And on the theme of cherishing yesterday, defending today, and protecting tomorrow, I'd like to start by talking about my time in Nigeria. So lately, I've been looking through catalogs of me in primary school, otherwise known as elementary school here, and I was thinking about that young boy back then who was absolutely curious about his natural environment, from walking through the forest to get to his grandparents' house, or going to excursions such as to the Cocoa Research Institute of Nigeria, or just watching nature documentary videos. That was my favorite pastime when I'm not playing soccer. And this was because in those videos I saw myself doing the things that those guys were doing, and those were the things that I held so dear to me when I had the opportunity to come to Canada. I was like, oh, I can finally, achieve these things. It's more achievable for me to get, to achieve those goals, those dreams. So it wasn't a surprise when I went to university and decided to study natural science. What was surprising to me was an incident that happened whereby I was struggling in a class, and I requested assistance from the professor that was teaching the class. And I remember going up to the office of this person, and I said, "Hey, listen, I really want to do this. I am struggling with your class. I just want to know if you can provide me with some insights of how to, be better as a student." This was my first year. And to my biggest surprise, the response was that I should quit and I quote, your people cannot do this. And that statement left a significant mental and physical health impact on me for years, actually throughout the time that I was in the institution. And but I realized, I think towards the end of my time in the institution, that I couldn't allow this to happen to somebody else. At the very least, I could do something about it. And what I sought to do was to create an organization or association whereby students can have a collective voice to address some of these issues. And because when I went through that, I didn't have that avenue. There was nowhere for me to talk to. I didn't know who to talk to. There was nowhere for me to go to say, this is what this person said. This is how it's affecting me. This is how I, this is what's happening. So I tried to do that towards the end of my time at the institution. But one thing that I realize now, and this is kind of like a way of protecting the future, is that we as Black people, we should be able to be comfortable to have these conversations, because these things happen, and and we don't talk about it often enough, amongst our friends or family. But it's okay. These things happen. We should be able to have these discussions. And thank you for giving me this platform to talk about it. But today, my capacity as an environmental scientist, I look forward and I take inspiration from previous individuals that look like me, that faced severe discrimination. In particular, recently I just discovered this incredible man. He's passed away now. His name is the former Lieutenant of Ontario, Lincoln Alexander. He was just a pioneer for Black excellence and Black rights in Canada. He was the first member of Parliament and first cabinet Black, the first Black member of Parliament and the first Black cabinet minister, and also the first Black lieutenant, which is a huge accomplishment. And I'm gonna leave you guys with this, what he said. And I hope as you progress in life and move forward, you can have this quote resonate with you. So he basically said, all I try to do is to do a job and to do it well. And as I am today, that has been something that I think about daily, to do my job, to do it well, so that somebody that is coming that might look like me can have easier access. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and hope you have a great time.
Thank you so much. So now, building on that, Dr. White, what change or changes would you recommend to Canada, and more specifically to Saskatchewan education curriculum, as it relates to Black heritage, Black history, and indeed the contributions of Black Canadians to community development and nation building? And indeed, we've had some of our participants, those who are watching us virtually, some have actually asked questions with regards to the education system and how much of the Black history or Black experience is captured or lack thereof.
So thank you. I feel very inadequate after listening to Femi. I thought that was quite lovely, quite powerful. And again, not a lot of time, so I'm going to be just trying to speak really quickly. It's clear from all the conversations that our education curricula, that they need to change. It's clear to all of us. I mean, every single one of our presenters, we've talked about the need to include materials about the history of Blacks in Canada. We know that stuff. And we need to talk about the long-standing history, this deep, rich history that we have of Blacks in Canada. So I just want to highlight a few points because of we're a bit late. First thing I want to say is that on a local level, as well as on a national level, we have to write the stories in a different way, right? So we have to write ourselves into the history, but we have to think critically about how we write those stories. I want to say that we have to stop comparing ourselves to Canada and pretending that we're so nice. That's the one story that I hear all the time. It's, well, we're different. But the thing is I think we're a little bit polite. And politeness itself is a very subtle form of racism. So when we're thinking of and talking about systemic racism, we pretend sometimes. So I'll just skip over that a little bit. I talked earlier about, emotional and psychological violence and how horrific that can be. And Femi talked about what that meant for his psyche, for his well-being. So whatever we're doing, the stories, the good stories, the bad stories, those complex stories and histories have to be deeply embedded in all domains of our curricula. And when I think about curricula, I'm not just talking about elementary and secondary school, I'm talking about post-secondary school, I'm talking about our church events, I'm talking about our settlement agencies, I am talking about embedding it in throughout all curricula. I'm also suggesting that we are still caught up in the business of thinking that, the celebrations, the food, the dance, the cultural activities, that's good enough. We need to go deeper than that. I think a lot of our settlement agencies do a good job of doing those cultural celebrations. I don't think we do a good job of talking about the real histories. The second point I want to make is that the materials need to include global international visioning and pictures. Our students and our communities do not often know or have any knowledge about the rich histories, the political and social structures from which we come. Those are very rich, strong places that we come from, but it's always presented as though it's a deficit. There are reasons why people have come here. It's because of the kinds of cultural genocide that's been put. When we look at the origins and the sources, it's often coming from because of first world countries. So we're all complicit. And so our students, all of us need to know those histories. They need to have that international perspective and think beyond just our small little world here. When I think about the materials that we need to have, yes, we need to know about Martin Luther King. We need to know about Nelson Mandela and all the Black leaders that have emerged as a result of sort of cultural genocide right across the world. I would love to see every student reading things like, that work, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Black Skin, White Masks, the Black Jacobins. I want them to read things written, for instance, by Wanda Bernard, a Canadian academic, Glenda Sims, a strong woman activist, host of other materials. I want to see that stuff deeply embedded within our curricula. The other thing is, third point, I want us to make sure that our students are exposed to us as speakers. We have to be the ones who are presenting as well. So get speakers, encourage, when we're teaching and preparing our educators, encourage them to invite speakers from the Black Canadian community to present within their classrooms. These could be elders. They could be people with lived experience. Pay attention to oral tradition and to listening to the voices of folks who do not necessarily have a PhD, but who are deeply committed Black Canadian folks who have the knowledge to share. And I really want people to start inviting the Grammys into those classrooms, by the way. And then the final thing I want to talk about, and Charlie, you know that it's a rant that I will always have. The question was about curriculum. Well, in order to make curriculum work, we got to have strong teachers. We got to have strong teachers. So whatever we have to do, we have to act on recruiting and hiring and making sure we retain Black Canadian educators and workers within our workplaces. If we do not change the composition and the makeup of our communities and our workplaces, we miss important conversations and awareness that will occur when we have new faces, people with different histories. Even in terms of students, when I started at the University of Regina as a student, I remember that sense of isolation, myself walking down, or always, the only Black face in the classroom. And now I've begun to see the changes. And now that I see the changes, I see the shifts in the conversations. The conversations are different. When you're present at workplaces or in classrooms, it will be different. So if we're really committed, we have to do the hiring differently. I do want to make the point as well that retention is huge, is absolutely huge. And one of the ways to do that is around mentorship. As a former dean of a faculty, one of the most difficult things for me when I tried to hire Black colleagues was trying to find mentors for them, good, solid buddies. And I'll tell you, that was really, really hard to do. And I know there's times, so the last thing I will say is we've got to create spaces on social media, the television, websites, the libraries, the museums, and do that work beyond Black History Month so that we continue to do the educating and we continue to provide materials that teachers and other educators can use. And again, Tansi, merci. Thank you, Anthony and his team, and I'm sorry if I went over time.
No, thank you so much. As you know, there is never going to be enough time to say it, but if we were to finish it all in one day, then we might as well close shop because then there's nothing more to talk about. However, there's a lot to talk about because there's so much to the richness and the beauty of Black Canadians and Black peoples and all people of color, Indigenous people. And there's a need indeed to bring that from the far burner, not necessarily back burner, to the very front burner, so that it can be part of all the conversations that we're having. So thank you for all the pointers that you've given us on how to not only recruit, but to retain. And to recognize that education transcends PhD or master's degrees. Coming from a culture where oral tradition is important, our foreparents will say, even if I've not gone to a formal school, nothing they teach you there can be equal to the wisdom that is in my head. That's what our parents say. And that's a fact because they are the knowledge keepers. And some of us, most of us, I would say, continue to try to walk in that path as we manage or navigate through formal education. We are respectful and we remain proudly so of the historical tradition and cultures of our parents, the stories told to us, and nothing is going to replace that. And to know that we can get to that point where a grandparent, a knowledge keeper, a senior from the African or Black Canadian community or Caribbean community and all other minority groups in Saskatoon can be part of the conversation at the table and have a voice heard, and what they say become part of changes that we need to have, serving on the board of directors, serving as part of organizational leadership. Then changes are not just responsive by way of incident, they become part of Saskatoon story, Saskatoon achievement, Saskatoon history. With that being said, the last question would have been that where should we start? What conversations should we have? and with whom should we be having these conversations? And we're very much aware of our sisters and brothers who have joined us out of province, recognizing of the time zone difference, and we don't want to keep you longer than necessary. But as people of Black descent, you already know that for us, time is immaterial. We always have 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 more minutes added on top of it all. So I would probably want to start, I'll go around a little bit, but maybe start with the mayor. What further, given all you've heard, what further conversation do you think we should be having? With whom should we be having it? And how do you see Saskatoon Black Canadian communities continuing to be part of, and strongly so, of the city of Saskatoon's vitality? Like Dr. Judy said, it's not enough to celebrate the dance and the cultural aspect of being Black. It is conversations like this. It is being at the table. It is knowing that they can be on city boards and all of that, and not necessarily by way of, again, credentials, by way of paper, but a lot up here. So unfortunately, now you're on the spot.
Yeah, so thank you, and I am gonna have to go soon. It's I have to make sure my kids get supper tonight, and so I apologize for that, but I really want to thank everybody for sharing the very thoughtful insights from a variety of different perspectives, and I've had the benefit of working with Dr. White. We had a group that was in a series of discussions in the fall, and that I hope to be reconvening with. What we've done as a city is last September moved a series of motions that, and as Dr. White said earlier, that the city needs to show leadership. We have a series of motions to identify where those systemic barriers are for people to get employment. And I have heard directly from people in a variety of communities, but especially from a number of different Black communities, the South Sudanese community, Nigerian community, and others, about the experience of having not even being given a chance to have an interview. And Dr. Zita, your comment about the study that shows that Canadians actually, even though we have this sort of reputation as being a great multicultural society, fall behind when it comes to the actual experience of discrimination in hiring. That's a realization that is coming more and more to my attention, I guess. And I would like to know what we do to take that away, to not have, because I've heard directly from people who say, we believe we have a chance to get a good job and have a good life in Saskatchewan and Saskatoon, but then when we go and we put our resumes, we don't get taken seriously. So I'm very interested in learning what steps we can take to implement those changes. We have formal resolutions passed unanimously at City Council to work and break down those barriers, and so the work has begun, but it's going to take ongoing learning about what the practices is that we can do. In addition, we have looked at our processes of people becoming members of boards and commissions, and how do we break down the barriers for people to have that representation around the table. What Dr. White just said is the conversation changes when you have people around the table. I really believe that is true. And if we look at the senior leadership of the city, there isn't a lot of diversity. When we look at City Council, there isn't a lot of diversity. We have to work to change that and meet those targets that have been talked about and make sure that we retain people. And so, Anthony, you're talking about creating a network. That makes it easier when you have sort of networks of people that you can work with to have those conversations and those dialogues. So I plan to follow up on those studies, on those networks, and also what was said earlier about creating the Black intermediary organizations, nationwide intermediary sector in Canada. I also see the advantage of this growing sort of network of intermediaries that can play a role, that we can learn from each other and build that understanding of what we need to do. And it's all about that next generation, all about those kids growing up here is as I said earlier, what focuses for me. So I'm gonna shut up now. I know we're way over time, and But I really have found this a fascinating conversation, and it's continually opening my understanding of where we're at and where we need to go.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. Always an honor, always a pleasure talking to you, learning from you, and indeed your openness also to learn across the board, because it's always a two-way street. Thank you so much for that. We do not take it for granted. As regards to the rest of the panelists, we know time is far spent. We cannot say it all in one day. We will continue the conversation. I want to, in a very special way, say a big thank you to Bekla, who is the co-moderator. Bekla is one of the emerging leaders of the youth around us here at Truly Alive. And that's, again, a way we demonstrate walking the talk. You know, the youth can lead. We just need to give them the platform and the support that they need. And there are a whole lot of them that work with us and volunteer with us. Our youth coordinator is a youth himself, because we believe it's important to have a youth work with the youth, then have an adult teach youth how to be youth. If you know what I mean. So it's been great, and we're honored to have you with us. I don't know if anybody has one last word, be it in English or French, before we call it a day, and we will continue to be in conversation. The board of directors of Truly Alive sends their regards. I really want to say thank you to Created by Jade, who did all of these decorations as a show of support and at no cost. So this is their own donation to, and Created by Jade is a Saskatoon-owned business, a Black woman-owned business in Saskatoon. And she's lending her voice and doing her own way, using all that she can to ensure that other women believe in themselves and they can achieve whatever it is they set their mind at. So thank you. So if anyone else has one or two things to say before we go, we will appreciate it. Please keep it brief, keep it short, and thank you. We'll start with Dr. Zita.
Yeah, just a quick one to add on what we can do. I think that when we are talking about Black excellence, most of the media tend to put celebrities there who are Black. And I think we need to move away from that type of discourse, because class, wealth and access to resources kind of subverts people's experiences. I know I come from a place of privilege because I have a PhD and I'm working. And so my experiences as a Black woman cannot be from the ordinary Black person who came here as a refugee. So it is important that in having this discussion, we continue to include ordinary people as well. And it is also important to include activists at the grassroots levels, as well as academics. I know that we are academics, but the interesting and the important reason why we need to continue to include academics and professors is because of the changing nature of the Black oppression and the Black experience. It is changing, and you need up-to-date knowledge, and you need people whose research continuously intersect with the issue of race and the Black experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have Ernest?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to conclude on a very simple note. I'm going to be quick about it. What I want to say is that it's one thing to think of you as a Canadian, but then at the workplace, when you go, you need others there to also recognize you as a Black Canadian in order to give you equal opportunity. So if I think that I am a Canadian, but others who are also Canadians don't recognize me as Canadian, they're not going to give me equal opportunity. And that is why these avenues of work and education given to the young people or to people who are already prominent, it's a step in the right direction, because they carry the light to the future. Today, if a Black man has an opportunity, it's an opportunity to show that you can do better, or you are at the top of your abilities, because he represents us as an ambassador. So what I'm trying to say is that we, the young people, when we get a job, we represent all the Blacks. It is our action that will make sure that people know that Blacks can do it, so that tomorrow, if an opportunity will be given to others too. When today we have Ahmed Hussen as a minister. We had Michel Jean as a Gouverneur General before. It is on their shoulder that other people will also get opportunity to have that level of leadership, so that tomorrow we are all given the opportunity at the same level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. Coyote is there, and I wondered if Ingrid has any thoughts, and please feel free to have your thoughts shared in French.
Thank you very much.
And then Ingrid.
Thank you very much. And Ernest, thank you for making that fantastic point that we talk about getting into the room, we talk about sitting at the table, and the need for us to ensure that when we eventually get into the room and do sit at the table, we do a fantastic job of it, so that we can blaze a trail for others to trail the blaze. We can stand in a position where others can stand on our shoulders and have greater advantages. That's fantastic. Thank you, Ernest, for mentioning that. Very quickly, I want to reiterate what I said about sharing our stories. It's important that we let our children know that, yes, there may be challenges, but they have what it takes to excel. We need to set the tone for them, whether you're a first generation, second generation, third generation African immigrant or Black Canadian immigrant in Canada. We need to let our children know that there will always be challenges, there will always be barriers, but they are not meant to stop us. They are meant to shoot us up to get where we can get to. And I'm glad that Raymond mentioned earlier on some of the earliest inventors in North America, who, in fact, so many of them were either people of African descent or Black people from other parts of the world. And we need to let our children hear that continually. We must also ensure that we tell our stories ourselves, not wait for other people to tell us our stories or tell our stories. A couple of days ago, I had the fantastic opportunity of listening to a presentation by Dr. Michael Yellowbird. He is a professor at the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Manitoba, and he spoke on using memory to decolonize systemic discrimination. And that was just a fantastic piece. If you're able to look for that study, I think we should take a look at it. And it just focuses on how we can use stories to change the narrative. First of all, to help us heal from experiences that were designed to put us down, and to also help non-immigrants understand where we're coming from. People may ask you, do you have cars in your country? Do you actually live in houses? Whether they're designed to put you down or they're asked genuinely, it's important that when we have told our children our stories and we have told our stories ourselves, they're able to reframe those questions and take it as an opportunity to tell their stories appropriately. So those who intended to put you down will be put in a position where they understand that you cannot be put down.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to Ingrid.
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. C'était vraiment un plaisir de pouvoir partager avec vous. Pour finir, vraiment, la seule chose que je dirais, c'est qu'on doit donner la chance aux jeunes qui sont en train de travailler dans la société. Je pense que c'est comme l'avenir, les générations, en fait, qui sont en train de travailler présentement dans la communauté, qui sont en train de s'impliquer, qui sont en train d'avoir des idées, un nouvel regard également. Et on doit leur donner la chance, on doit leur donner leur opportunité de s'exprimer, de pouvoir en parler, de pouvoir nous faire part de leurs projets en même temps pour pouvoir faire un changement. Alors, je pense que tout ce qu'on a dit aujourd'hui, en fait, ça revient au point des générations. C'est les générations qui sont maintenant qui veulent faire un changement, puis ils vont pouvoir le faire si on leur permet, si on leur donne la place dans la société. Alors, ça fait des années, ça fait des siècles qu'on travaille, que la communauté noire travaille pour pouvoir arriver où est-ce qu'on est maintenant. Ne les empêchons pas de le faire. Comme je disais tout à l'heure, je pense que les limites, on les impose nous autres mêmes. Et parfois, en voulant chercher trop les changements, on ne se rend pas compte que le changement est déjà en train de se faire dans la société. Alors, laissons la place aux jeunes également de pouvoir s'impliquer, de pouvoir nous partager leurs idées, que souvent, ça va être de très bonnes idées. Je vous remercie énormément à tous les panélistes, tous les panélistes qui ont partagé avec moi aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup, Anthony et Laure Bécla, pour l'invitation également. Et je vous souhaite une bonne soirée.
Thank you so much. And I will ask Raymond if he has another final comment. Raymond, you're it.
Just to say thank you to everyone here at this event today. Thank you again to Truly Alive and all of my friends on the panel and others who are visiting. The one thought I have is around how we want to advocate, or what we want to advocate to, in terms of confronting anti-Black racism when it rears its head. We've seen south of the border that this is always just beneath the surface in our culture and society, and there's a kind of renewal, a fresh boldness with which those who would conspire against our cause it's still present. So I think to myself, and I sort of think back to my days at Human Rights when enforcing human rights with the Human Rights Commission here around what consequences or what type of advocacy work we ought to do to ensure that there are consequences to those in those cases when the evidence emerges that there really is an attempt to discriminate on any one of the prohibited grounds. And so I think, just to my friend and human rights lawyer, I think of work that may be done to ensure that economic consequences flow towards those that would intentionally try to work at cross purposes with our cause towards equity. So those are my sort of final thoughts. And thanks again to all on the call today and to Truly Alive for putting this event together.
Thank you so much, Bekla. You're it.
Okay, merci beaucoup à tout le monde pour avoir participé à la discussion et ceux qui sont en train de visionner ça en ligne. Et oui, merci beaucoup d'avoir contribué. On est content de savoir ce que vous pensez du mois des Noirs et les contributions dont vous êtes en train de faire dans la communauté élargie. Merci.
So this is where we draw the curtain, like they say, and many thanks to all of us who have been a part of this conversation. We appreciate you. Please, the conversation continues, but it does not stop there. The action must follow, but action that is impactful, action that we all can look back, like I believe it was Raymond who mentioned it, when we're old and maybe grayer, for those who are already gray, we can then look back and say, what did I do with my time? What did I do with my voice? And when I was at that table, how much of my voice did I lend? And did I get comfortable being at the table because I'm already there? Or did I really demonstrate the importance of pulling others up, raising their voices, and letting posterity speak for me when I'm no more? And on this point, I want to say, have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm not sure how much of it is left. And your worship, thank you for staying from the very start to the finish. Yes, you've got to go be the family man after all. And to the rest of us, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Cheers.